The stolen treasures of the Zulu kings, power locked in glass. Why are the royal treasures of Africa's mighty Zulu kings locked away in glass cases thousands of miles from their homeland? Why are priceless cultural symbols that embody sovereignty, leadership, and identity sitting in European museums instead of being cherished in Africa? The answer is as powerful as it is painful, because these treasures were never lost. They were stolen, and every jewel, every leopard skin, and every headdress still locked behind glass tells a story not just of culture, but of conquest. Today, we uncover the truth behind Africa's stolen royalty, a history too rarely told in classrooms, but one that continues to echo in every debate about colonialism, power, and the right to memory. The power of the Zulu crown, the regalia of a Zulu king, was far more than decoration. It was not fashion. It was not ornament. It was the living embodiment of power, carved into leopard skins, crafted into beads, arranged into headdresses that symbolized sovereignty and divine authority. Every piece of the king's attire spoke a language of rank and heritage. The leopard skin cloak, reserved for royalty, marked strength and kingship. Beaded designs carried codes of lineage and tribal identity. The elaborate headpieces weren't just ceremonial, they were symbols of political legitimacy. To the Zulu people, these treasures were sacred. They represented the soul of leadership itself. And in the 19th century, when the Zulu kingdom stood tall as one of the most formidable powers in southern Africa, these treasures were as important as crowns and scepters in Europe's monarchies. But in 1879, everything changed. The Anglo-Zulu War erupted. Britain, fueled by its imperial hunger, sought to expand control over South Africa. For the Zulu kingdom, the war was not just about land. It was a battle for survival. Despite the legendary Zulu victory at Isandlwana, an African army defeated one of the most powerful empires on earth, Britain pressed on with overwhelming force. And when the empire finally crushed the Zulu resistance, they didn't stop at conquering territory. They stripped the monarchy of its very symbols of authority. The treasures of the Zulu king, the leopard skins, beadwork, headdresses, staffs, and royal ornaments were taken, looted, shipped across oceans, and locked away in Europe. What had once embodied sovereignty was reduced to curiosities in museums, trophies of conquest displayed not for honor, but for ownership. Why they keep them behind glass? Now here's the uncomfortable truth. If these treasures were meaningless, they would have been discarded. If they were primitive, as colonial narratives often claimed, they would not be kept under lock and glass, guarded with the same seriousness as gold and jewels. The opposite happened. These artifacts, dismissed in rhetoric as symbols of a lesser civilization, were simultaneously preserved as priceless possessions. Why? Because even the colonizers knew what they represented: power, authority, legitimacy. By stealing the crown of the Zulu king, they weren't just taking art, they were taking sovereignty itself, severing the spiritual link between king and people, and rewriting history in their favor. The silence in history books. For generations, the story of these treasures was silenced. African history, especially the history of resistance and cultural greatness, was erased or minimized in classrooms and textbooks. Students learned about British victories, colonial administration, and civilizing missions, while the plunder of royal symbols was conveniently left untold. But the glass cases in London and other European cities tell the truth that history books ignored. They are not just museum displays. They are reminders of what was taken and of the narrative colonial powers wanted the world to forget. The debate of repatriation. Today, the question burns brighter than ever. Should these treasures be returned? Across the African continent, nations and leaders are demanding the repatriation of stolen heritage. Nigeria has pushed for the return of the Benin bronzes. Ethiopia has called for its sacred relics. And in South Africa, voices grow louder for the return of Zulu regalia. Museums argue about preservation and universal heritage, but these defenses collapse under one reality: the objects were stolen, and ownership cannot be claimed through theft. For many, returning these treasures is not simply about correcting the past. It's about healing wounds, restoring dignity, and reuniting people with the symbols of their identity. The power of remembering. The treasures of the Zulu kings remind us of something vital. History is not just about the past. It is about power in the present. Colonial powers understood this when they stole them, and they still understand it today when they guard them behind glass. To remember them is to challenge silence. To speak of them is to reclaim history. And to fight for their return is to demand justice. Because these treasures were never lost. They were never abandoned, they were stolen. And acknowledging that truth is the first step toward reclaiming not just objects, but identity, sovereignty, and pride So the next time you see a golden crown, a jeweled sword, or a leopard-skin cloak sitting in a European museum, ask yourself, whose story does this object really tell? And why is it still guarded like treasure? The answer is simple. Because these items are not relics of a forgotten past. They are living symbols of power, identity, and resistance. The treasures of the Zulu crown are more than artifacts. They are proof. Proof that Africa was never without greatness, never without kings, never without sovereignty. And as long as they remain locked behind glass, the world must be reminded. They weren't lost, they were stolen. If you believe these treasures should be remembered and returned, share this story, subscribe for more untold histories, and keep the conversation alive, because remembering is power.